everyone. It's really nice to be with all of you today. My name is khai, bahriah. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a senior UX writer at Epidemic Sound based in Stockholm, Sweden. I am a tanned woman with shoulder length hair and glasses, standing in a warmly lit room. There's some art on my wall, and I'm really excited to be here. When Felix posted about this conference on LinkedIn yesterday, he said, somehow we've come to believe that opportunities is only for the chosen few, for the rich and for the superstars. Talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. But why do we need to create opportunity for people who are not equally represented in the room? Here to talk to us about why diversity is important for the design community are Ethel Zlotnik, she, her, Senior User Experience Designer at TD Bank based in Toronto, Canada. Drew Montgomery, pronouns he, him, based in Toronto, Canada also, Product Designer at Wayfair. Ryan Yao, pronouns he, him, based in Canada, currently Product Designer at Curative. And lastly, we have Erica Ellis, pronouns she, they, based in Colorado, US, Head of Product Equity Design at Uber. At the end of this session, we'll be taking questions from everyone in the crowd. Hi, everyone. Let's start with Erica. What do we mean by diversity beyond race, gender, and sexuality?
I mean, diversity is absolutely everything, right? It's anyone's lived experience, anyone's perspectives. So you can think about culture, you can think about where you grew up, whether it was in the United States, whether it was in a different country, or even just regionally within a specific country as well. It's education, it's access, it's absolutely everything. It's, do you have access to the internet? Diversity is every single difference that we can have as individuals. And it's important to remember that as well, because we do tend to really focus on race or gender. But it is, while those are absolutely important, I do not want to negate the importance of those, but it is important to make sure that we do understand the vast diversity of diversity.
Yeah, and when we talk about diversity, we also talk a lot about inclusion. Maybe Drew, you could add to that. What is the difference between diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, sure. So diversity can be described as like the makeup of a workforce, for example, and inclusion is valuing the opinions of those people that are a part of that workforce.
Ryan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think within the context of product design and tech, a lot of times diversity is used as a checkbox, and we don't necessarily think about inclusion. Um,
Mm,
I think the two should go hand in hand, but one is not one doesn't exist without the other. So there's no sense in checking the boxes of the different types of things that Erica just mentioned, but
mm.
also valuing and including the opinions of those same groups.
Ryan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with what Drew said about diversity and inclusion. I think we those two things definitely need to exist at the same time. Like we need both of them.
Mm,
And to create a safe environment for all the people to share their thoughts and
mm,
to share their opinion are like extremely important. So
mm.
not just invite them to the team, to the company or to the meeting, but also have a space to let them safely share their opinion to make a change in
Yeah.
the company. I think that's more important.
Mm. And as a product designer, do you have a perspective on this within design, maybe? Why is diversity important in design?
I think first, like we need all kinds of people to who have complementary skills to each other, so we can build a stronger team and more greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm,
And we can be more aware of all the opportunities that we can take on and we can change, and make sure that we are identify ideas and implemented them in a culturally appropriate, relevant ways, like without diversity of people, it's hard to like understand other people's perspective. It's hard to implement our design idea into like actual useful way.
Yeah. Ethel, what about in your daily work as a designer? How do you think about diversity and inclusion?
I think I start by recognizing what exclusion is in each of the decisions I make within my designs, or just by collaborating with my team and just trying to understand when we make a design decision, for example, for whatever we're building, thinking, okay, if we do this, who's going to feel excluded? Are we hurting someone? Is someone not being included in this decision? So I think it's a lot of just like being very mindful of what we do as designers, because at the end of the day, our decisions will affect someone. And what we're trying to do in our work is trying to avoid getting people hurt, getting people feel excluded, getting people feel like the products that we're putting out there are not designed for them. So I would say that that's sort of like my goal in my everyday job, just like being very conscious about what's happening around those decisions.
Thank you. I'm wondering if any of you have an example of a brand or company or design leader that you feel is doing this right or doing this wrong, and why?
I don't know, like, sorry,
Yeah.
go on.
Oh, I was just going
please.
to say, I think that's a really tough question. I don't
Yeah.
think that anyone is doing this incredibly well yet. I think the practice holistically is fairly new, unfortunately, right? I mean, we're have been building tech for decades upon decades now, but that tech has been built upon centuries of systems and practices of oppression. So there's a lot that needs to be undone. There are definitely people who are shifting the field and pushing it forward. But yeah, I mean, I think we all have room to improve. Absolutely.
I love what you said, Erica, because another thing for my team, we're trying to remind each other that it's not about perfection. It's about the effort to get there. And it's okay to try really hard and still not get it right, as long as we keep this in mind, keep this practice in mind, always remind each other.
Absolutely, because you
Yeah.
can't get it right if you don't try to begin with, right?
Yeah. And it's okay to say it's hard. It's okay to say it's uncomfortable. It's okay to tell each other that that's not the best idea. Let's move forward. I need to eat my own advice because, it's hard. On that note, how can we be more intentional then to make sure that everyone gets the attention that they need? How do we ensure that everyone is in the room, as you say, when we do design sprints or when we talk about design? Ethel?
I think that by even just bringing people, like, yeah, you have your like ideal user, but thinking of like how whatever you're building will also affect not only like the average, but even just like the other sides of the spectrum. And having those people in your room, if you're going to do user testing, for example, thinking about accessibility, thinking about people with different backgrounds, even just cultural abilities and everything. I think that having that, and as designers being there in the room and just noticing how whatever you're trying to test and whatever you're trying to put out there is actually being helpful and actually making people's lives better or easier instead of the contrary. So I think that's for sure a way, just being very mindful of.
I love that you touched on user testing, because for UX writing, it's which is what I do. It's sometimes mistaken that native English speakers are the best users to test it on. When if you think about language and think about English and natural way that people talk. You have to include non-native English speakers. Or if you don't even write in English, you have to include, maybe if you're in Indonesia, but you want to target users who are in Indonesia but don't speak Indonesian well. Just remember that not everybody speaks the main language that your app is in. I've been kind of drilling that with my UX research team, and I think we're getting there. We're pulling more people outside of the US, and I'm really happy about that. Do you, Ryan or Drew, do you have examples of things like this in your design team, maybe?
So I wanted to add that I think exploring diversity like occurs at different levels. So I think the organization or companies have, the industry has has a role to play. The organizations that we're in have a role to play. Us as designers have a role to play, whether it's mentoring or advocacy to the groups that are underrepresented, or whether it's helping others within our organization to understand the value of design and including them in the process. I think that's important. I think at an organizational level, it's also important to like go further than like I've seen us going, right? So a lot of times when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we focus on hiring, and I think that's a little bit late, like in the stage to be addressing certain concerns, because some, like for example, some underrepresented groups have never heard of these fields, right? So they wouldn't even get to the point where we'd be interviewing them to bring them into an organization to make it more diverse. I think of experiences that like, so I'm in Toronto. There's some schools where they don't have computers. They've never heard of design or coding, and then there's other schools where they literally have one or two computers at the school that they can use. So I think going further and exposing people who are not traditionally exposed to these fields earlier in life, so that they can understand the possibilities, so that when it gets to the time where there's hiring, there's a lot more people from different backgrounds in the hiring pipeline.
Yeah, I want to touch upon the hiring as well. I think sometimes it's really important to give option to candidates on what they are comfortable with. Like some people might be more comfortable with doing like whiteboarding. Some people are less comfortable with that. It's hard to do. It requires the company to invest more resources into hiring, but I think it's just important to let candidates shine with in their I would say comfortable environment. And also it's if you are doing like a panel interview, it's also important to make sure you invite different people into a panel, not just from the same background or from the same or all designer. Like it's just important to get different people's perspective on the candidates. So make sure we are not sharing the same bias. I think that again it requires more resources from the company, but that's just a step I think is necessary to work on.
Yeah, and that way you really do give an equal chance to everybody.
Yeah.
You mentioned if people are not comfortable doing whiteboarding exercises, and that it is quite common in hiring and design. How would you suggest, like what best practices have you seen, either your company or other companies, when designers reach this technical stage of the interview process?
For our company, we just try to do use presentation and just behavioral questions to get a sense of the designer skill and their ability to solve problem, their way of thinking through a problem. We just try to do less on like how do I say on the spot like challenges and before we had the resources to do more like contract work. Like if we really found a candidate that's strong, we will bring them on for like 2 weeks to do a contract project. So it's same idea as like whiteboarding or take-home design challenges, but it just allow the candidates to have more time to think through a solution, and we can provide the necessary context, necessary help to make sure they are doing best their work. But yeah, we haven't done it recently. It's just a lot ask for from both sides. So we're still trying to find what's the best way to do this. Yeah, like it's a progress.
Yeah, but it's really cool that you're actually making like baby steps, I think. What about how can a candidate advocate for themselves if they feel that during the interview process that maybe they might need more help? Does anybody have suggestions or tips for anybody listening in probably that might be in this stage?
I just want to add, and maybe just before
Sure.
the candidates actually go to the interview, that there's like this other layer that we also have to consider, and is that once a person sends, like, for example, their CV or something, there might be even just AI looking at that. Like, there might not even go through a real person looking at that, and even how we're training that AI and making sure that it's inclusive as well. It's something that we have to have conversations around, because, like, for example, if a company is mainly I don't know, like maybe males or white males, and the AI is trained for that, it will automatically default to that. So what kind of information we're putting into that to go past that, like, first step, I think it's something that has to be considered, and that I know there are conversations around that, but that's the first step as well, even before going into the interviews.
I've heard of ATS systems that offer to employers the option to anonymize the CVs that they get. And when I heard about that before, and I thought that was really good of the company to consider that this might be important to the employers, that they want to remove as much bias as they can on even the earlier stage. So I think that's great in the industry, and I hope it's a practice that's employed more by more employers. Erica, Uber is a huge company that constantly has candidates in the pipeline. As a design leader, how do you check for your own biases when you're hiring?
That's a really great question. And just to throw this out there, I'm representing myself and not Uber, but I do work there. And so how I check my own biases throughout hiring is as frequently as possible. Definitely hiring via panels. I'm not the only person. I am the end decision maker, but I don't make a decision unless the team is on board with it. I lead equity design, and I specifically hired an incredibly diverse and passionate team. So I make sure that they are there representing all of their own knowledge and their own perspectives and that diversity of background to help evaluate. I also make sure that I'm looking outside the box. I think in tech, we typically look for specific skill sets, specific experiences, specific companies that people are coming from. And there are so many translatable skills and experiences that live outside of the tech world. It's really important to kind of broaden our perspective and break through the biases that we have around tech specific experience to make sure that we are including people who may not have that specific background, but all of their skills, all of their knowledge translate pretty much one-to-one into what we're doing within tech or within our product teams. So yeah, I would challenge everyone to think about things a bit differently and understand how skills translate. And you don't have to be a carbon copy of what already exists at your company. Like, that is another aspect of diversity, is making sure that you are bringing in other skills, or people from nonprofits, or all of these different experiences can help you build a better product.
And have you found any any challenges along the way as you try to put this into practice, whether among your peers or the panelists that you try to bring in? What challenges do you face as you try to advocate for diversity and inclusion in the hiring process?
I think one of the biggest challenges is just getting everyone to think outside that box and have everyone checking their own biases. And another big issue is the urgency around hiring, right? In a lot of companies, there's pressure on hiring within a specific timeline, or you'll lose that head count. And it takes time to build a diverse pipeline, because it's not a pipeline issue, right? It's a network issue. So you have to make sure that you are connecting to people that you want to hire, that you are reaching out and joining communities that you want to hire from. And it takes time to do that. The talent is there. You just need to put the effort into finding it and cultivating the relationship with those people that you want to bring into your team. So it is time heavy. And especially like as a hiring manager, it takes a lot of my time. It's not just the recruiter's job. It's not just the sourcer's job. It's my job to make sure that I am in and out of every single thing that's happening within a rec that I'm hiring for. A lot of times hiring managers like, oh, it's the recruiter's job to like go out and find people, but it's not. If you want to hire a good team, you want to make sure that you're hiring diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds. You have to be in it, and you have to be in it deep as a hiring manager.
And you mentioned networks. What kind of networks might this be?
Yeah, I mean, your professional networks, like who are you connected to on LinkedIn? Are you an ADPList mentor? What other community organizations are you involved with in like locally or regionally? And making sure that you're not going to just like the standard, like, oh, you know, whatever big tech company is having a meetup, but you're actually joining more of those niche community meetups and making those networks and connecting with people. And looking for organizations too that aren't just focused on like the next new shiny tech thing, but like Code for America organizations, people who are working towards building good in tech and using their skills to make a change civically. That's really important as well. And you'll find a lot, personally, I think, more interesting people doing that work. And so I think it's really important, just again, like expanding your perspective of what it means to be working in tech.
I appreciate that you mentioned niche networks, because I meet a lot of career changes as a mentor in ADPList. And my advice always is, don't forget that that you have a career before you have a niche. If you're a medical practitioner looking to go into the UX, there's lots of companies that are intersection of both. So if you know your niche and you go to the right networks, you're more likely to move faster in the process. Ethel, I'm sorry, I feel like you raised your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Oh no, sorry, just my cat jumped in my lap.
Yay, kitty!
Cat people are the best people. Yeah, you are. Drew, Ryan, do you have anything to add about niche networks? Maybe did any of these networks help you? Have you found mentees going into niche networks where they can proudly show that they're from maybe a minority community and get themselves seen where they might not have otherwise been able to be seen?
I think for me, I met a lot of people. I'm Chinese, so I met a lot of people from China that working in North America. That they are usually like introvert. I'm introvert, so and we English is our second language, so it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for us to voice our opinion. It's hard for us to find the right way to voice our opinion because of language barrier. And I often just kind of remind people it's sometimes like it sounds kind of bad, but sometimes you just have to be a little bit rude. You just have to like push forward it, speak out, even though you may cut people off, even though you may talk over people. That sometimes you just kind of just have to do that to get over the initial like barrier. That's what worked for me. Sometimes I just won't even like I would just interrupt people. It's not a good thing to do all the time. So it's not advice I would suggest people to keep doing it. But yeah, it's once I'm more comfortable with speaking, I'm more like conscious about how I do things, how I say things. That's important. But also just another way you can try is help other people to speak out, like give other people a chance to speak. That eventually it's gonna help you at some point. Just help people. Is I don't know. It will just come back in my experience.
Yeah, I think it's about intent. What you say is if you do it too often, it's rude. But then when you have to, when you're not being seen, sometimes you just have to speak louder to put yourself in front. As a minority woman, I've often found myself among white men where I do have to speak louder, and I've worn out my patience, and I'm like, please listen to me. I have a point to make, and this is actually my field of expertise. Maybe you want to listen to what I have to say. So I feel you really, Ryan. I think all of us have been there, right? Drew, I feel like you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, I wanted to address like niche networks. So when I was when I was coming into design, there weren't really a lot. ADPList wasn't around. There weren't really a lot of networks that I felt like truly a part of. That's one of the reasons why I volunteer my time, and I feel like on ADPList a lot of people connect with me because of my background. Um, I reached out to a lot of like people like one person removed or two persons removed, like in my personal network. So one of my goals now is to develop a network for. I know we're not like we're trying to deviate from race, but it is important that, for like a lot of black product designers or black people that want to transition into product design. One of my friends is actually in the comments, and we are actually actively working on creating a network for that. But I do find that on ADPList, a lot of people connect with me because of my background. So I'm Caribbean.
Mm,
There's not many black product designers. And what I try to do is help them understand the value of their experiences and the value of their perspectives. At the end of the day, we're developing or designing products for a wide range of people, and I feel like in tech there's a majority that's not reflective of the communities that we're building for. So I do like try to do my part in that way, and share my story and help instill confidence and talk about some of the struggles that I had coming into the industry, and the fact that a lot of the same feelings that people experience coming into the industry, I experienced some of those same feelings: imposter syndrome, not feeling included, feeling intimidated, feeling like UX and product design was this black box that I had no idea about. And I do like convey that leveraging ADP list for like anything design related is one of the biggest stepping stones towards transitioning into the field.
yeah, ADPList was awesome. I think we were all here because it is a really great place to be, great community. Drew, did you say that you're also establishing a small group? Did I get
Yeah,
that right? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, please put that on your professional ADP list page. I'm sure everybody will be looking out for it. I'm gonna be looking out for it. Thank you. We're gonna head into the we're gonna head into the Q&A section in just a bit. To wrap this up, shall we just go one by one to talk to just say what was the most important thing you learned from another panelist today? Drew, since you're the last person to speak, you wanna go?
Yeah, I think in terms of like what Ryan spoke about in terms of like different ways to create like alternative ways to interviewing panelists. Because right now I think a lot of companies have like these cookie cutter approaches that don't necessarily fit the diverse groups of candidates that are applying for jobs. Some people operate better in high pressure situations, some people don't, right? So I think just as a field, we need to be more empathetic about the people that we're in court, like trying to bring into our organizations.
Thank you, Drew. Ryan, what was your favorite thing you learned from another panelist today?
I think it was Erica mentioned about progress and just kind of reminder to everyone that it's about making the progress rather than achieve the perfection.
Thank you. Ethel, what about you? What was your favorite?
I think I would say it was from UK. We're just sharing about how to pay attention about when you're writing for people who don't have English as their first language. I don't have English as my first language. So I truly value just the work that's done and how you pay attention and you writers pay attention to that, and just to make sure that everyone is included with the language, which I feel that sometimes it's overlooked, but it's so important within the experiences. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Ethel, for noticing content design. My favorite thing is your sunset in the background.
Thank you. Sharing it with everyone.
Yeah. Erica, your favorite thing?
Yeah, just want to plus one the importance of content. But I also think it's important, Drew mentioned how he gets sought out because of his background and, especially like his visible diversity. And I think it's so important to keep that in mind as we look to hire more diverse teams and stuff like that. Like, we're not tokenizing, that we're not doing this for the wrong reason, that we're actually being really intentional about how we're hiring and how we're looking to add people to the team and how we're looking to give back to communities that do host a more diverse group of people. So I think that's always really important to remember.
Thank you, Erica. I'm gonna just take a quick look at the Q&A tab. Right. Okay. The first question we have comes from Mario. He's asking, how can you have stakeholders be more engaging of the diversity community and not just for one-time events? How can we check them? Should I try to rephrase this? How can you have stakeholders be more involved to think about diversity in the hiring process?
Is this for the hiring process, or is this for like holistically?
Let me just say, there's comments here. Oh, Erica, you've already answered this. Do you want to expand on your answer, Erica?
Yeah, I think my answer actually didn't quite read the question correctly, so I'll re-answer here. I think it's important for stakeholders to know what's at risk if we don't do this work. We always talk about the rainbows and sunshine of working in DEI and like what the amazing effects are of doing this work, but we don't really talk about the harm that can be caused if we don't do the work. And so making sure that everyone knows the risk and what is truly at stake for not investing time and resources into doing this is really important, because it's kind of brushed over most of the time of the actual harm that communities can experience when we don't do this.
Yeah, and that's something we really want to avoid. Does anybody else want to add to this?
Yeah, also, I saw some research about diversity can help bring more business value. I think you can Google it. I don't remember. I've got what the exact research is about, but yeah, I think for stakeholders, if you present the data that diversity is it's really helpful for the business. I think they are more willing to spend more resources in it.
I appreciate that you said that, Ryan, because it's sometimes I get comments from my colleagues that, oh yes, it's the moral thing to do, but what's the ROI? And then they always want the numbers, and I get a bit crushed, but it is sometimes the reality. Has anyone else faced this, and how do you have any advice on how to overcome it?
Yeah, fine. I think what I'm gonna say ties into the original question and what you're asking.
Sure.
Um, I think having stakeholder involvement in your process as designers is helpful.
Mm.
I think if they're in testing sessions or they're in workshops, and the nature of the workshops or the testing sessions are going to be different based on the group of people that are there, and then ultimately back to metrics like um, consequentially, if you have like a more diverse team across the process, chances are the likelihood or like the outcomes or the targets that you're trying to hit will be achieved. So showing that value that way. But I find like having them involved in whatever process you're going through is helpful in advocating.
Thank you, Drew. The next question is from Rajesh. How do you overcome biases in your respective companies and projects? I feel like we touched on this a little bit about how do we overcome our own biases when we're hiring, but what about the people around us? What about the company and our managers and their managers?
So I can talk a bit to that, and I would have to echo a bit of what Drew was mentioning. Just like by getting people involved in some of these processes and just like actually being part of, I don't know, the workshops, being part of what the users are saying of the user testing, for example, it's easier for more people to understand and to empathize with this. So I think that that involvement it's a key part of just like breaking some of those biases and putting them into testing.
Do you find it hard, Ethel, when you're trying to pull more people in to these workshops and stuff that you mentioned?
Not really. Like people tend to be open just because they want to even just see what's happening
Mm.
and be part of that. It's not that their involvement tends to be completely active. Sometimes it's just like they watch silently, and it's good to have them just in the room because it helps to build that empathy with whomever will be using the product. Like, for example, involving, I'm thinking, developers who sometimes may have an idea of how something might has to work out. And then when they actually see the users trying to use that, they realize that this is not working. I have to change this process, for example. So people tend to be open to just being part of the design process, at least in my experience.
No, I appreciate that you said that, because sometimes opening your mouth is the hardest part, opening out the mouth to like, because you feel like, oh, maybe they don't want to. And I agree with you. Oftentimes people are more open and interested than we think. And sometimes it's all just about opening your mouth and asking and being brave, like Ryan was mentioning, just like using the voice that you have. Ryan, I feel like you wanted to add something. I saw.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we mentioned it already, but like just bringing different kinds of people into our test group or test people. I don't know how to say exactly, but yeah, that can also help just overcome our bias in our
Mm.
projects.
I think
Thank you.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just saying thank you, Ryan. Drew, you wanted to add. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like I think also just developing personal relationships. A lot of times, especially when we're working remotely, we don't develop not like go. You don't have to go out for beers or whatever it is with the person, but like reaching out for coffee chats, building a rapport, and then that will help develop a relationship that you can kind of convey certain things that you may be shy or may not be as ready to convey had you not developed that relationship. So like sounds really simple, but like actually reaching out and talking to these people more frequently um, is definitely a way to also influence like stakeholder management.
Yeah. I mean, us working from home and being remote is also making it harder for inclusion practices. Um, Erica, do you have something to add?
I think it's just knowing your own biases and who's represented on your teams and making sure that you're looking to shift that power. historically, right? A lot of white people in tech specifically. So how do you shift that power? Part of that is hiring. Part of that is who you're talking to in research. Part of that is who you're bringing in and thinking of as designers. I think my hope for design holistically is that we end up being more facilitators and less of actual designers, and letting those that we're designing for design, right? So we would be facilitating sessions for them to be able to design the solutions to their needs and their problems.
Beautiful. Thank you, Erica. And thank you, everybody. It's been really lovely talking to everyone today. I've learned a lot. Thank you for coming to this session, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for moderating.